From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on January 9th, 2025, here at South Carolina ETV Studios in Columbia. We're not in the radio suite. We are down in the big studio. That's because we have our live taping. That's right. We bring you an exclusive interview with South Carolina House Speaker Murrell Smith, who spoke with me and Maayan Schechter during our first live taping of 2025 on January 9th here at SCETV. Now, we look at the state of play for 2025, big issues from school vouchers, taxes, and what curveballs may be lurking as lawmakers kick off the first year of the two-year session on January 14th. This is something you're not going to hear or read anywhere else. This is a huge get for us, and we are excited to bring it to you in a moment. But first, were you at our live taping on the 9th? Let us know. Give us a shout. Let us know where you want us to come next. We are planning some other live tapings this year, so give us a shout at 803-563-7169, and we will see you on the road this year. The Lead is back on the road, folks. But without further ado, here is our live show from Columbia. This is Studio Gavin tossing it to Live Gavin. Welcome to the South Carolina Lead, and this week in South Carolina crossover episode for 2025. That's right, I'm Gavin Jackson here at SCETV Studios in Columbia. We have a great live audience with us. Hello, audience. That's right, we're previewing the 2025 legislative session, and to do that, I'm joined on stage with South Carolina Public Radio's Maayan Schechter and our special guest, House Speaker Murrell Smith. Speaker Smith, welcome. Welcome to you all again as well. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
So, Speaker Smith, let's just kick this off. We got about 20 minutes to talk to you, and this is a privilege for us. But we want to ask you just really simply to give people an overview of basically what your job entails as Speaker. I mean, you have to corral a whole chamber of folks. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. Give us a little overview of what you have to do and how you keep things moving.
Yeah, well, first, let me say it's an honor to serve the citizens of South Carolina in that position. I'm obviously a representative. I'm elected from District 67 in Sumter County. And I had the pleasure of being elected as Speaker in 2022. Finished a little bit of the term in 2022 when the former Speaker resigned, and then started my own term thereafter. But the Speaker is a unique position in South Carolina. And I can tell you what I always tell people is the one thing that I've learned quickly about that is I gained 123 new constituents, and they are a whole lot more needy than my constituents back in Sumter County. And so you obviously have to deal with members, and it's the House is obviously you've got employees and people who staff committees and work in the operations of the House, and the Speaker is the head of the operations of the House, which are delegated to the clerk and a lot of number of others to handle. And then I have to preside over the chamber. Have to wear a purple robe every once in a while. I don't look real good in purple, and then also. Make committee assignments, and that's probably one of the most important things. And then every piece of legislation that is introduced is I have to assign it to a standing committee and determine what standing committee would have jurisdiction over that and do that. And then, we also have to deal with some HR issues every once in a while. Fortunately, it's not the members so far in my tenure, and hopefully it'll stay that way. But it's a lot of responsibility, but at the end of the day, it's an honor. And what you heard Adrian mention in the beginning is I'm the 61st person that has been Speaker of the South Carolina House of Representatives since we became a state. And that's, you think about that. That's an honor to be one of 61 people who served. And, I always want to make sure that the institution is served with honor and integrity. And that's one issue that I've really tried to make sure of, that we are really concentrating on maintaining the integrity and the decorum in our institution.
Mr. Speaker, we're at the start of the first year of a two-year session. You've got a lot of priorities this year. We'll dive deeper into them, but could you just give us quick 1 to 2 sentences, if it works, of what your top priorities are for this legislative session?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, Hurricane Helene is we're going to have to work on making sure that we fund that appropriately. that upstate, especially in some of the western areas, were devastated by that. It's probably some of the worst damage that they've seen in the history of the state. And so we got to make sure that we repair that immediately. And obviously there's a FEMA match, and I think we're trying to work through that. The good news is that at the end of the year, Congress passed a relief bill, and we're trying to dissect that right now, determine how much money is going to come from there. But first and foremost, we need to clean up and repair ourselves from Helene. Number two, another issue, and I've talked about a lot, and we'll talk about it in more detail, I presume, but I think tax relief is a big issue. South Carolina has the highest income tax rate not in the country, but in the Southeast, and one of the highest in the country. And we can talk about low tax state. We are a low tax state, and that's something I'm very proud of. But when you look at when we're competing with our neighbors, and we're competing with people all over the country for jobs and industries and employers to come and move here. And when they Google South Carolina, and you see that it's 6.2% tax income rate, and North Carolina is now at 4.45%, moving to 3.99. Georgia similarly is moving below 5%. It's time for us to be competitive with our neighbors, because our neighbors are who we're competing with for jobs and for industries in this Southeast region recently.
And Speaker, when we're talking about what state economists are forecasting for budget growth, they're projecting strong revenue growth in one-time dollars, while also acknowledging that the revenue is about to stabilize, and we're coming off that sugar high from all those big spending bills from COVID-19 and such from the federal government. But how does this shape your approach to where you think the budget should go? Obviously, you're not over the budget, but in some ways you are in some ways. So how do you see where revenues are going affecting the budget this year?
Well, I think the revenues are continuing to increase. Is we have $540 million of new recurring money out of a $14 billion budget. And other states right now are really having to make cuts in their budgets. Their revenue is really trailing off, and some states are in the negative. And South Carolina, fortunately, is not that right now. We have continued to see growth. We have continued to see jobs. We continue to see revenue. And that is because of our economy. And our economy is something that has really been resilient. But we're fortunate and unfortunate in the same term of having a lot of people are moving here and locating their businesses here, and that's great. And as long as people are continuing to move here and job creation is still occurring here, that I think we have a promising future. But with that is going to be more infrastructure, more things that we're going to have to deal with as we are a growing state.
You talked about the income tax rate cut. What rate would make you happy? What would you like to see the legislature do this year? And on top of that, some Senate leaders have said that they'd like to see a more holistic approach. Now, what is included in that holistic approach remains to be seen. Do you think that there is an appetite to look at everything as well?
I think there's an absolute appetite to look at everything as well, and we've done that in the past. And what you find is that when you weight it down with a holistic approach, then it really dies under its own weight at some point, because it accumulates more people who are opposed to it. That's why what we're looking at is going just to the income tax right now. We need to have an overhaul of our entire tax system. It's antiquated. It's time for us to reform that. But right now, we need to look at the income tax, because it's a competitiveness issue for us. And what I would like to do, I would like for it to be at zero. I don't think we have to tax income, but right now we need to be competitive with our neighbors, and that means less than our neighbors' tax rate. So I would look in the 3 to 4% range, start with having triggers like every other state's doing, and bringing it down eventually to zero.
So multi-phase?
Yes.
Gotcha.
I was going to say, because we've seen holistic approaches to reducing taxes and analyzing taxes in the past, and it doesn't seem like it ever really goes anywhere. What do you think the speed bumps are, and do you think everyone's on the same page now to actually make some movements on that? Well,
I think everybody agrees we need to lower our tax rate. The devil's in the detail, and we have been working on this for a couple months now, and it is not an easy task. There are a lot of road bumps, speed bumps in the road, as you say, and we're trying to work through that. And the goal is to flatten the tax and not have a progressive income tax, but have one flat rate. And you have to broaden the base. I mean, right now, 42% of South Carolinians do not pay income taxes. And that's because we're on this federal taxable income. You start off at federal taxable income instead of your AGI, and the federal government then basically dictates tax policy to us, to which we have to follow. And so I think we really need to make that switch to adjusted gross income, and we need to continue to push down that rate.
But then, Speaker Smith, when we talk about that and we change the tax structure here and we change how money gets into the budget, I mean, are there any concerns that we're already not funding enough of the state agencies to what they need? How do you make up that shortfall?
You take this out of growth. And we've had good growth over the years, and you put these triggers in when you can afford it, when you have in years like currently we are at 6.2%, and to go down if we have revenue growth of more than 5%. And so that lets you still be able to fund government and be able to reduce taxes.
Another big issue that we're going to see this year is obviously the debate over school choice expansion, which y'all already had this year, but the Supreme Court ruled unconstitutional. The Senate has started sort of a miniature debate. They say it's going to be the first thing out the gate this year, but they want to pay for these private school vouchers using state lottery dollars. Is that something the House is going to agree with, you think?
I think the House is going to analyze anything that can move the issue forward for education savings accounts and for choice. I think, obviously, our body has been very strong advocates for school choice. And whether the lottery revenue is a sustainable mechanism moving forward, I have some concerns about that. But at the end of the day, my biggest concern right now is we have families and 5,000 children that are now enrolled in school and all of a sudden had the rug pulled out from under them by the Supreme Court, and now they have, in the middle of their educational year with their children, have to make a choice. Can we leave them in private school, or do we have to remove them and put them in a new school mid-school year? And so I think the lottery may be a way for us to plug a short-term gap, but long-term lottery revenues are continuing to taper off because of the high from COVID, and not everybody's buying lottery tickets anymore. And so I think we need to be careful about that, because we've made certain commitments to the colleges and to the schools and to the technical schools, which are very critical for the success of our state.
But likely any bill that winds up passing and the governor signs into law will have to probably go back before the state Supreme Court. So anything that y'all plan to pass would probably pass this year?
Yes. I think so, and the Senate is taking the lead, which is fine with us in the House, and we've had discussions with them, and we'll be ready when they send it to us to act quickly.
Speaker Smith, talk to us about energy reform and utilities and the need for this growing demand for energy in the state. Obviously, we've been seeing a lot of growth with advanced manufacturing in the state, data centers moving here. We saw the governor earlier today. He was talking about the South Carolina Economic Developers Summit. He even mentioned coal being a solution to help feed this demand. I don't think that's going to happen after what we've seen so many of these plants go offline, but there's talk about bringing VC Summer back, that $9 billion boondoggle. I mean, that's something that we're seeing up in with 3 Mile Island when Microsoft is talking about bringing that reactor coming back online. So walk us through the situation here with this demand for energy in the state and where we are right now and the need for more of it.
Well, right now we're at a critical juncture of almost not being able to service the energy needs of South Carolina. And like you mentioned, we've done a great job of recruiting industry, but they are high-end users of power. And when you're growing a population as well, there's more demand for power. So, we'll see how it works out for us over this next few days. We're going to be in the 20s for a sustainable period of time. If the sun doesn't come out, we're going to have some problems.
Well, New York could be like the state of Texas, hopefully.
So I hope we don't have rolling blackouts. But people don't understand how critical this issue is right now. And we are having to buy power from Georgia and from North Carolina. And that is not what we need. We need to be self-sufficient. And so, I'm not here to say there's one magic bullet or a silver bullet that's going to solve the problems, but we need to invest in anything that creates energy. I'm an all above approach, with that. And so I think that's what we need to do. Georgia it cost them a lot of money, but they completed their Vogtle nuclear reactors, who had the same problem we had with their contractors. And they're looking to start up 2 to 4 more of those and to help keep up with the demand in Georgia. And so I really hope we take a hard look at restarting these nuclear reactors. I would like to see that, with it not putting the taxpayers or the ratepayers at risk. There are, you mentioned Microsoft. There are a lot of private investors who would want to do that and assume that risk. There's money at the Department of Energy for loans to try to restart nuclear right now. So I think that we need to take a measured approach to everything, and we need to incentivize and create more generation. And we also need to make that come online much quicker. We have a burdensome regulatory environment. We need to reform that. That's going to be reformed at the federal level with the new administration coming in, and we need to do our part to make sure we can do that in South Carolina.
And we saw the Senate dealing with a lot of those meetings in the off session since you guys tried to get that bill through. Last year was a heavy bill. It's a big bill that have to read through. But why is this so incumbent upon the legislature to do something? Why isn't this just something that we can leave up to the private industry to take care of?
Well, South Carolina is, per our Constitution, is the one that regulates utilities, and we grant service areas to the utilities. So we are basically in charge of the power system in South Carolina, and we delegate that authority down to the Public Service Commission, and then we grant service areas, and then we also have the electric cooperatives, which are created by statute. So we need to be setting the policy for South Carolina, and for that to be carried out by those that we delegate those responsibilities to.
Another issue that you've had as even like a personal priority, passion to get through that did not survive this past year, I want to mention, is a bill that got very close to the governor's desk, as you know, that would have consolidated the 6 state public health agencies into one office. And that bill died due to a procedural move by the Hardline House Freedom Caucus. A similar bill has been filed this year. Do you see that going through? Will we have a consolidation law signed by the governor this year?
Well, I hope we have a consolidation law, because for those who oppose consolidation, that is probably one of the most fractured healthcare delivery systems that we have in the country. And I can't tell you the number of times that you have dual diagnosis. You have people who have disability and special needs services, and some who have mental health services, and they overlap, or even with Department of Social Services to some degree. And what happens is, when they need treatment, it is the finger pointing. Well, that's really not our job, it's their job. And so not having a system that it can deliver for the needs of the citizens of the state only harms the citizens. It doesn't harm the legislators or the government. It harms people who need health care. And so I'm very passionate about that. We got caught up into a bumper sticker politic name of health czar, and we were creating powers and from all the COVID that we had. And I don't think anybody in the General Assembly wants to create someone that can lock down South Carolina, or that can mandate vaccines and things to that effect. But at the end of the day, that was a very small part of it. And I do think that there's a push in the Senate and a will in the Senate to consolidate, and there's a will for us to consolidate. We would like to stay out of having this debate all over again about mandates and vaccines and things to that effect. There's a medical freedom bill that was working its way through the Senate, and we'll probably be dealing with that at some point. But we need to segregate those two issues. We need to make sure we consolidate and provide the best health delivery service that we can in this state, and then we can deal with the medical freedom on another bill. So we'll see what happens there and what it looks like. The governor now is advocating that we just give him the appointments, and he'll do that, and certainly we'll try to consider that, but I think ideally we would like to consolidate.
And Speaker Smith, we have about 5 minutes left. We have a couple more questions, but I want to follow up a little bit about that when we're talking about that bill and how that got objected to. And we're talking about the House Freedom Caucus. You're talking about 124 people, including you in the House chamber. A lot of personalities, a lot a lot of divisions in some respects. You guys do have a supermajority as Republicans, but there's about 17 members of the far-right House Freedom Caucus. You were challenged for your speakership. You obviously got reelected easily, but I want to ask you if there's some similarities there, because I feel like we're always talking about differences, but where are there similarities? Where can you guys work on things, whether it's, closed primaries, reducing taxes, ending joint and several liability, the sexiest topic that we could talk about. But is there common ground, and how do you navigate that?
There is common ground, and they have a new chairman this year, and he is a policy guy, and he is, I think, committed to trying to make South Carolina better. And I've had discussions with him, and we're trying to find common ground with him and his caucus, as we are with every other caucus. We got families caucuses, we got Democrat caucuses, and we're trying to. The thing that I like about South Carolina is we're not Congress. We don't hate each other, and we don't say let political divisions and ideology separate our friendship. And we know each other. It's a small state, and so I want to make sure that I try to govern by collaboration, and that's I'll work with anybody who wants to work to make South Carolina better and who wants to be reasonable. And I think that hopefully we'll have a chance to kind of put the gamesmanship down and the rhetoric, and let's concentrate on policy.
And I want to follow up with that by looking into Washington too, where you have the trifecta for Republicans. You have the House, the Senate, now you have the White House. You supported President-elect Donald Trump. And throughout the primary process, you're up in New Hampshire with him. You're close with him. We have a lot of other folks who are close with him in the state, too. You also have Senator Lindsey Graham, who's over the Budget Committee. Senator Tim Scott's over the Banking Committee. A lot going for South Carolina. So how important is this relationship going to be with Washington for the next couple of years?
Oh, I think it's critical. And I'm so excited about the new administration coming in, because what we're going to have, first and foremost, all the lawsuits in South Carolina suing the federal government will probably stop. So they'll save us some money on legal bills. But also, I mean, you think that what they're going to do is states are the best incubators for good ideas, in my opinion. And I think that what I understand is that they are going to return some of the power back to the states and let the states dictate the policy, not send money with policy and with conditions, but continue the money that comes in here, and don't worry about dictating how you spend it, where you spend it, and what programs you have to implement to spend it. Let you all make the decisions what's best for South Carolina, because what's best for South Carolina is not going to work in California and in any other state. So I think we've got a golden opportunity here for the next 2 years to work with the administration, to work with our senators and our House of Representatives, and to try to make sure that we do what's right for South Carolina.
We have about 2 minutes left here, so I want to ask you just really quickly some top priorities that we could see maybe immediately moving out of the House. Obviously, we're talking about education in the Senate. What could we see moving quickly out of the House?
I think you'll see energy come up first, and we passed that bill overwhelmingly last year and got pretty much the same body, and so I would expect that we'd be able to have a similar vote. So I think that's going to be the first bill that you'll see on the floor. And as you know, we have with session and starting a new session, the work's going to happen in the first few weeks in committee, so we get the bills to the floor. So I think that's going to be the first bill that you'll see on the floor.
Mm-hmm. And then also just getting a focus on infrastructure as well, and that's going to be all through the budget, assume. That's
a budget issue. There's some ideas that we have on reforming the procurement process and how we can speed up some of that. And I think that you'll see some bills introduced, or that may have already been introduced, to help improve that process. But at the end of the day, we have to continue to grow our infrastructure. As someone who went and watched the South Carolina Gamecocks play in Orlando at the Citrus Bowl and spent 4 hours and 10 minutes trying to get out of South Carolina on I-95, I sure hope we start widening I-95 sometime soon.
All right, that's House Speaker Murrell Smith. An indelible memory right there. Yeah. We're still going to roll for the podcast really quick. We have a quick lightning round for you. I don't know, a lot of people probably have this question in the audience, but medical marijuana died in 2022 in the House, and it hasn't been back since. It's something that came over from the Senate. Tom Davis is always big on. Do you see that coming out this year?
I don't see that coming out. I still don't think that there's the votes in the House for that. It's in committee, and certainly if the committee wants to pass it, it can be passed out, and we can take the vote on the floor. But I just have not seen where there's evidence that there's a broad swath of support for medical marijuana in the House.
You kind of touched on this when you were discussing your responsibilities as speaker, but what is the hardest part, outside of wearing the purple robe, about your job?
Committee assignments. I think committee assignments is what you struggle, because everybody wants to be on a committee and you got to disappoint people, but I've learned that you're going to have to be forthright, and you got to make decisions, and you got to work with your committee chairman and explain to people why you can't assign them to the committee. But that's always that's the biggest struggle I have every year for the last 2 times, is come in and decide who's going to what committee and have people who are disappointed about it.
Out of the House and the Senate, who is your best friend out of those chambers?
Outside the House.
Actually, in the House and in the Senate, which would you pick? Who was your best friend in both those chambers?
Who would you, yeah.
Yeah. Out of all of them, out of 170 people, who's your best friend?
So you're trying to make up 169 enemies for me.
Here, we'll ask you a much easier question. We're hearing a lot of chatter early about people running for governor in 2026. Are you going to be one of them?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Any higher office?
Absolutely not. I love serving in the House, and I've had opportunities to run for the Senate, and I think the House is a great institution, and I'm honored to be where I am right now.
2 more quick questions. Is Sumter part of the PD?
But as being born in Florence, I say Sumter is part of the PD. Some would argue with me, but when I became Ways and Means Chairman and now Speaker, now they all of a sudden saying Sumter is in the PD. But also the Midlands is trying to claim us too.
I worked in Florence for 4 years and I never claimed Sumter, so.
That's your loss.
Something that we've learned about you is that you know what gas station where you can buy the best ice cream. So tell us, for those folks who are on the road, doing some road trips maybe this year, best gas station to get a quick bite on the road.
Well, obviously Buc-ee's is my favorite place, and I spent an hour in Buc-ee's on the way back from Florida, stopping in the one in Daytona Beach. But I love the QTs, and I am now proficient on how to order on a computer and get my ice cream cone, and they make the best egg rolls I can get, so I get that. My wife gets the grilled cheese, and so that is a must stop every time I get on the interstate, and I look for the QT. And
it's quality. I mean, yeah, the fried chicken there too. Yeah. At Spinks, I'm a Spinks guy, so I'll take that. House Speaker Smith, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
All right, thank you for having me. Thanks. Thank you, guys.
Well, that was fantastic, folks. What a great way to kick off the new year. And thanks, as always, for you and for listening. We love you guys. Show us your appreciation by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love that too. Or a voicemail, like we said at the top, 803-563-7169. Let us know where you want us to go next. I'm telling you right now, we're thinking spring break in the Grand Strand, so get it ready. That's a little tease right there. But you can always stay up to date with the latest news on scetv.org/news and southcarolinapublicradio.org. And don't forget to support your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lede is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lede, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina. AT, can you get a brown liquor really quick? Is that possible?
Oh, yeah.
Brown liquor. Brown liquor. Brown liquor.